Hi everyone. So today we are going to discuss about the module data collection in our research methodology. So you all know about what is data. Data என்னன்னு எல்லாருக்குமே தெரியும். So நம்ம research பண்ணணும்னா நம்ம வந்து first என்ன பண்ணணும் டேட்டாவை கலெக்ட் பண்ணணும். ஓகேவா? ஸோ டேட்டாவை கலெக்ட் பண்றதுக்கு there are two types of data. ஸோ அந்த என்னென்ன டைப் அப்படின்றத நம்ம தெரிஞ்சுக்கணும். ஸோ ரெண்டு டைப் ஆஃப் டேட்டா இருக்கு. ஒன்னு வந்து என்னதுன்னா பிரைமரி டேட்டா, இன்னொன்னு வந்து என்னதுன்னா செகண்டரி டேட்டா. ஓகே, ஸோ பிரைமரி டேட்டாஸ் வந்து நம்ம எப்படி கலெக்ட் பண்ணுவோம் அப்படின்னா த்ரூ சர்வே இல்ல த்ரூ அப்சர்வேஷன் ஆர் த்ரூ எக்ஸ்பெரிமெண்டல். ஓகேவா? ஸோ சர்வேஸ்னா எல்லாருக்குமே வந்து நார்மலா தெரியும். ஸோ சர்வேஸ் வந்து நம்ம வந்து கிரியேட் பண்ணி அதை வந்து எல்லாருக்கும் ஷேர் பண்ணுவோம். ஸோ தட் தே வில் ரெஸ்பாண்ட் டு த சர்வே அண்ட் த்ரூ தட் வி வில் கலெக்ட் த டேட்டா. ஓகேவா? அதே மாதிரி அப்சர்வேஷன்னா we will doing certain observations. நம்ம வந்து அந்த அப்சர்வ் பண்ணி ரெக்கார்டிங் மூலியமா நம்ம வந்து டேட்டாஸ் வந்து கலெக்ட் பண்ணுவோம். அண்ட் எக்ஸ்பெரிமெண்டல்னா த்ரூ எக்ஸ்பெரிமெண்ட்ஸ் மூலியமா நம்ம டேட்டாஸ் வந்து கலெக்ட் பண்ணுவோம். ஸோ செகண்டரி டேட்டாஸ்னு பாத்தீங்கன்னா ஸோ நம்ம என்ன பண்ணணும், ஒரு லைப்ரரியில போய் டேட்டாஸ் கலெக்ட் பண்றது இல்ல கவர்மெண்ட் செக்டார்ஸ்ல இருக்க ஃபைல்ஸ் இல்ல டேட்டாஸ் அந்த மாதிரி கலெக்ட் பண்றதெல்லாம் வந்து என்னன்னா செகண்டரி டேட்டாஸ் வரும். ஸோ சம் சோர்சஸ் வந்து ஃப்ரம் ஆர்கனைசேஷன்ஸ் வி ஆர் கெட்டிங். ஓகேவா? ஸோ அதெல்லாம் வந்து செகண்டரி டேட்டாஸ். த டேட்டாஸ் விச் வி கலெக்ட் இண்டிவிஜுவலி இஸ் நோன் அஸ் primary data, and the data which we collect from other organizations. Already இருக்க டேட்டாவை நம்ம கலெக்ட் பண்ணோம், அது வந்து செகண்டரி டேட்டா. ஸோ இப்போ டேட்டாவை கலெக்ட் பண்றதுக்கு நிறைய மெத்தட்ஸ் இருக்கு. ஓகேவா? ஸோ ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வந்து என்னதுன்னா அப்சர்வேஷன். அதாவது நம்ம ப்ரீவியஸா சொன்ன மாதிரி நம்ம எப்படி டேட்டா கலெக்ட் பண்ணுவோம்னா அப்சர்வேஷன் மூலியமா நம்ம வந்து டேட்டா கலெக்ட் பண்ணுவோம். தட் இஸ் வி கலெக்ட் டேட்டா த்ரூ அப்சர்வேஷன். ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள், if a researcher who's collecting data about the feeding of lion in forest, so what he'll do is that he will not be the participant. Okay, he'll be observing that at what times the lions are feeding, and he will make a record of it. So it is the non-participant. It is the researcher will not be participating in that observation. So he will just observing the event. The second one is to interview. That is to know about the latest modern irrigation techniques used by the farmers. What a researcher can do is that he or she can go and do a direct face-to-face interview to know the challenges, what and all the what and all the farmer is facing in using the modern irrigation techniques. And through questionnaires we will collect the data. That is if a researcher is in education, he's doing research in education. For example, to collect data, for example, to know to research on the study habits of the students, what he can do is that he can send a survey to 500 universities, like a survey, so that the students can respond to the survey questions, and through that he can when students answers those questions, so he may receive the data for doing for assessing how the study habits of the students are there. Then like previously we saw the secondary data. It is the data which is collected from other organizations or government sectors. So now we are moving to types of variables. That is, so once we have collected the data, we need to know that the data belongs to which kind of variable type. So there are different types of variables used in data collection. The first one is independent variable. That is, independent variable is that variable that is change. It can be changed, but that change will not be affected by other variables. For example, we are going to water plant. Okay, so what happens is that depending the water can be of any amount. Okay, so but the amount we use to water the plant, it depends how the plant grows. Okay, so the water is an independent variable. We can use any amount of water to water the plants, but depending on the amount of water, the plant will grow. Okay, so for example, so the growth of the plant is dependent on the water amount. Okay, so if we pour medium water, then the plant grows effectively. But if we pour a huge amount of water at a time, then the plant dies. And if we pour a little few amount of water, then the growth is very slow. Okay, so So what is that? The dependent variable is that which is dependent on the water. Okay, but the water is an independent variable. Okay, so the change of the water will not affect anything, but the amount of water is used to grow the plants affect its growth. Then the extraneous variable. Okay, so extraneous variable is that uh, a researcher may use the common things. Okay, for example, to grow a plant, the same sunlight is used. Okay, so identically every plant will receive the same sunlight and same amount of water, and the same seeds have been sowed in the three pots. Okay, but what the difference is that the soil used in this three pots is different. Okay, so here type A soil is used and type B and type C soil is used. So what is that is that the we didn't focus on the type of soil, but we are focusing on the sunlight, water, and the seeds, and the different types of seeds used to grow the plant. But here the researcher is not taking into the account the type of soil, but the type of soil also affects the growth of plant. Okay, so but the soil is not taken into the consideration. So that is what is that extraneous variable. So the variable which is which affects the effects of research, but we are not taking into the consideration. We are not focusing that variable in our study. So that is extraneous variable. So it is like a summarization. So the dependent variable is what? It is a fertilizer. Okay, so for depending upon the amount of fertilizer, what happens that the plant grows well. Okay, so if the fertilizer is how it is used, it affects the growth of the plant. Okay, but the fertilizer is an independent variable, and the extraneous variable is that the type of soil. Okay, so the soil is that we are not focusing about the soil in our study. We are focusing how the amount of fertilizer or water affects the growth of the plant. So this is the area where the researcher focuses. So here the how the soil affects the growth of plant is ignored. Okay, so but that also affects the growth of the plant. So that is known as extraneous variable. And continuous variable. So continuous variable is that for example, if we ask the heights of the students in a class, okay, so what will be the answer? Every students have a different heights. Okay, so like 169.4 one student and 182.5 centimeters. So the values are is that it's not the same. Okay, it is infinite. So the values will be infinite and the same as weight. Okay, so weight also it will be it will give a infinite values. Okay, so for example, continuous variables are the variables which have a decimal point. Okay, so decimal point, the values which are ending in the decimal point is considered to be the continuous variable. So for that example only we saw height and weight. So height and weight mostly will be represented in a decimal representation. Okay, but decimal value. So discrete variable. So discrete variable, you can take it as a whole number. Okay, so whatever the values or whichever the values are represented as a whole number, then it will consider as a discrete variable. For example, if I ask the question, how many cars are standing in the vehicle parking? So we can count and say like a 50, 100 or 200, but not 50.5 or 20.5. Okay, so it has a whole number. So the value returned is a whole number. For example, the scores, most goals scored. Okay, so the goals which are scored also, we can represent it as a whole number only. Okay, for example, 58, 52, 46, like that we will represent it as a whole number, not a 66.5 or 58.5. So goal is represented only the whole number. And for example, I am asking how many students are there in a class. So we can say only 5, 10 or 15. Or we can't say that 15.5 or 12.5 or 13.5. So we can't represent it as a decimal value. So for example, same way, how many books are in the bookshelf. So whenever the values are represented without decimal value. That is, as a whole number, it is considered to be a discrete variable. But when it is represented as a decimal value, okay, so that is represented as continuous variable. Okay, so one more example is that, for example, if I am asking you how many cities have you visited so far, okay, so you can give your answer such as I have visited 10 cities or 20 cities or 50 cities. Okay, so you can say that 1.5 or 15.5 or 13.5. So it cannot be represented in a decimal value. Okay, so so I hope you would understood the differences between the continuous variable and discrete variable. So in a shortcut, you can remember as that continuous variable is the one which has the decimal value, which can be represented in a decimal value, and the discrete variable is the one which can be represented only in a whole number. And the next one is sampling methods. Okay, so there are different types of sampling methods used in data collection. So first one is probability sampling, and the next one is non-probability sampling methods. So in probability sampling methods, there is a random sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling, stratified random sampling. Okay, so we mainly concentrate about on the probability sampling methods, then the non-probability sampling methods. So sampling methods, okay, so in sampling methods, the first one is random sampling. So random sampling is something that I'm taking a different categories. Okay, so in that randomly I'm selecting the population for the research. Okay, so for example, so in this category I'm randomly selecting selecting the second one, and that is color is difference between the populations. Okay, so the green represents one kind of population, purple represents one kind of population, and the yellow represents one kind of populations. Okay, they have differences. Okay, they are categorized into different categories in this three colors. Okay, so what I'm doing is this, in the first category I'm randomly selecting the number 2, and in the second row I'm randomly selecting the 8, and in the third row I'm randomly selecting the 10. So what I'm doing is this, in a set of population I'm randomly selecting a few populations to do the research. And stratified sampling is that, what I'm doing is that, for example, you can think of like this: in a college, what they are going to do is that they are going to send a survey. So before sending a survey, what the institution is going to do, that they are dividing the students into different departments like engineering, mathematics, arts, and laws. And after dividing the students into different departments, what they're doing is this: they are randomly sending the survey to the each students in the departments. Okay, so that is what stratified. That is dividing a group of people, and to that group of people they are sending the surveys to respond. Okay, clustering sampling is that grouping. We always know that cluster means it is grouping. So what we do is that, for example, to collect the school details, what the government can do, that they can select randomly 10 districts, and in 10 districts they are collecting all the school data. Okay, so all the data of the schools present in each district. So they are grouping in a district wise. And what are the stages in processing? Okay, so that is in data processing, what we do is that editing, coding, classification, and tabulation, and finally graphical representation. So editing is that usually we are collecting data through surveys. So when we receive the responses, what happens is that there may be some errors or misvalues. So what the researcher will do, that he will before proceeding to the analyzing process, he may correct the incorrect values. And the coding is that we will assign a numerical value to the responses which we will receive in the survey. Okay. And classification, you know that we are going to group the responses into 2 categories or 3, or according to the researcher's view of according to the researcher's view. And tabulation is nothing but we are going to represent the data collected from the surveys in a table format. And finally, we use a graphical representation, which can be a chart or graph. So what is this? What is this? Is that this is a coding. Okay, so what I said, that in survey we will assign a numerical value. Okay, so for example, I'm creating a survey where I'm asking the question, or you what is your gender? Okay, male or female. I'm giving 2 options. Okay, so what when it is sent, the what will do that, all of them will fill the responses. Okay, so mail means what I'm doing that the code will not be seen by the seen by all. It will reflect only on the researcher's response side. Okay, so whoever has selected the mail, the response will be as one in the researcher's side, and female it will be represented as two. Okay, then this is the table representation. So we all know the table is consist of rows and columns, and the data will be represented in rows and columns. For example, this is the code book. So whenever I'm sending a survey, what I'll do is that what are the categories in the questions, I will list out. For example, so what I do is, for example, age. So I'm asking the age means what I'm doing is I'm feeding all this value in the responses. I'm giving a drop down menu like the 21 to 30 or age group is, or 31 to 40 or 41 to 50 or 51 to 60 or 60 and above. So to each group, what I'm doing is I'm assigning a numerical value. That is numerical value is that I'm assigning a code. Okay. So whenever I receive the response, I can receive that how much code that is this category is how many people have responded as 21 into 30, or how many people has responded into 41 to 50 categories. So I can, yeah, it will be easy for the statistical analysis. For example, for marital status, what happens is that I'll give two values, married and married, and I will assign numerical value for numerical code such as 1 and 2. So like this, what I'm doing is for each question I am having a multiple answers. So for each answers, what I'm doing is I am assigning a code, so which will be effective for doing the statistical analysis. So now we are moving to the hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing is that we are going to like a detective solves a mystery with clue. Researchers also use the hypothesis testing. That is to check if our ideas are correct. Okay, so if you are doing a research, then we will to identify whether our idea is correct or not, we will do the hypothesis testing. So first one is that we need to make a hypothesis. For example, eating a chocolate before an exam does not improve scores. Okay, so the what I'm taking this is a null hypothesis. This is H naught, and eating chocolate before an exam does improve scores. So this is I'm taking as a alternative hypothesis. So in a hypothesis testing, first step is that we need to assign two values. That is, one we need to take as an H naught null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis. So here my research is that eating a chocolate before an exam will improve the score or not. Okay, so if it is improving the score, means I am taking as H1, that is alternative hypothesis. If it is not improving the score, means I am taking it as a null hypothesis. So this is my idea, and I need to check whether my idea is correct or not. So now we are going to proceed with the test. So what I'll do is that I'll gather the data. So what I'll do is I will divide the group of students, one who eat chocolate before the test and another does not. And I will compare the scores, whether their scores is increased or not. So if the chocolate group scores higher, does that mean that chocolate is magic? Not so fast. We have to check if the difference is big enough to be real or just by chance. So we need to see the difference, how much difference is there. So if the chocolate group scores way higher, we say we reject the null hypothesis, meaning chocolate really might help. Okay, so when I'm doing the test, if the group of students who consume the chocolate before the exam has been scoring high, then I will reject the null hypothesis. And if the scores are almost the same, then what I'll do is that we fail to reject null hypothesis, meaning we don't have enough proof that chocolate makes a difference. So we can't reject the null hypothesis, because if both the scores are same, means we don't have any evidence to prove that eating a chocolate before the exam will make the students to score well. So it's like proving a claim with data instead of just guessing. So whenever the researcher is doing a research, so he need to prove the idea exactly what is correct. So it is not be a guessing. Okay, so scientists and economists use this method to test medicine, stock market trends, and even sports strategies. So now overall, so one more example I would like to say for the hypothesis testing. So there is a scientist, so he need to test whether the listening to the music before the exam improves the memory or not. So the same, this is my idea. So the researcher's idea is that whether it is to test whether listening to the music will help the students to score better or not. So this is the idea. What I need to do is I need to in hypothesis testing, I need to assign two values. That is the step one, that I need to take as H naught hypothesis, null hypothesis, and the second one is alternative hypothesis. So in null hypothesis, I will assign that it doesn't improve. Okay, wow. In alternative hypothesis, I will take that it improves. The memory improves while listening to the listening to the music before the exams. So I will collect the data. Then I need to reject the null hypothesis. If I'm not unable to reject the null hypothesis, then my research will not be having an enough evidence. Okay, enough evidence to prove that it is true. So on the whole, now we have discussed on the whole we have discussed everything about the unit 4 data collections. That is, we saw what are all the methods used in data collections. That is observation, interview, questionnaire, secondary data. Okay, so observation is observing some data, and interview is that we have a face-to-face interview to the person and addressing his challenges and knowing what are all the challenges he's undergoing. And questionnaire is that we need to send a survey questions to everybody. And secondary data is we collecting data from other organizations or resources like government sectors. Then we saw what are the variables involved in the data collection. So dependent variable, independent variable, extraneous variable, discrete variable, continuous variable. So dependent variable is the variable which will be affected by the change. Okay, wow. So independent variables that it will not be affected by the change. Okay, so variable which is affected by another variable is known as dependent variable. A variable which is not affected, okay, it is known as independent variable. Extraneous variable is that the variable which is not focused in the study, that is known as extraneous variable. Discrete variable, I simply said that if it is a whole number, whatever value we are getting as a whole number, it is a discrete variable. Continuous variable means like continuous, you can think like decimal value. So it keeps on going, right? After the decimal point, we will have certain numbers going on. So you can continuous variables, you can keep it in your mind like decimal point. Okay, so whatever the value which is represented in decimal form, it will be taken into the consideration as continuous variable. And we saw what are the strategies involved in data analytics and statistics. So like random sampling, stratified, cluster, and judgmental. So random sampling is that I'm simply taking a random population. Okay, so random population and doing the survey. Stratified is that I'm dividing the population into certain groups, and from that certain groups I'm selecting randomly certain population, and I am forwarding the survey. And clustering is that I'm grouping the population into different categories, and then I'm doing the survey. So judgmental is that, for example, I am a researcher who need to do a research on a new treatment for a disease. What he does that he interviews a highly experienced doctor, so that is a judgmental. So here the researcher goes towards a highly experienced doctor to know about the new treatment of the disease. And processing, so what all the data processing is done is that editing is that correcting the mistakes or errors which is received through the responses from the response from the survey. And coding is that to assign a numerical value, and tabulation is nothing but to represent the data in the table form. And we have discussed about hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing is that a researcher need to claim the idea whatever he's doing is true. Okay, so how he will do is that he claims this idea by proper evidence. So he assigns a null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis, and and after gathering data, he need to reject the null hypothesis. If he is failed to reject the null hypothesis, then his idea is not evident enough to prove that it is true. And finally, generalization. So generalization is nothing that, for example, if a researcher is taking 500 students in a university and observing the heating habits. Okay, how the heating habits affects the lifestyle of the students. So after that, after collecting the data, what he does is that he generalizes that this will be the lifestyle of the every students in the all the universities. So that is generalization. So interpretation is nothing that uh, the same concept it can be applied. For example, so studying in morning helps the students to score better marks. So So this is the idea. So what researcher can say that after that we can interpret that morning study improves the academic performance in general. So that is interpreting. So I hope you would have understood the unit 4 data collections. If you found useful, do like and share. Thank you.